covering this event live all weekend. This is taking place here in Washington, D.C. This is live coverage on C-SPAN.
On economic growth for the NGA. Delighted to have all the governors here and the other participants as well. This is going to be, I think, an outstanding forum and discussion of what we need to do on one of the key, if not the key topic for a lot of us as governors, which is creating growth and jobs in our state. Governor Nixon and I are leading this. I'm the chair, he's the vice chair. I have to draw attention to how incredible this moment is for the two of us, if you'll pardon me a bit of regional rivalry. Today, in 1 hour, the last game between KU and MU will take place. This is a border rivalry that goes back, I believe, 107 years, Jay. We're going to whip you. He gets the mic next, so he can comment as much as he'd like to.
Jay decided to join a real conference.
Yeah, well, we have a real discussion about that, too. I think we've got a pretty good one as well in the Big 12.
Y'all play football up there?
We got a few teams that know how to play, and a few teams know how to play a little basketball, too, and a few other sports. But they have decided to go another way, and so we're going to have a nice rivalry game, and that's why this meeting will end on time for sure, so that we can make sure to watch it. I do have my Jayhawk tie on that C-SPAN could focus on if you would like here for a good Jayhawk shot. But we're going to be able to talk a lot about economic development here today, and it's going to be a good topic for us and a good hearing, and it's a key one. With that, I want to make sure that we move forward on a good clip and get a good sense from our participants here, the governors, and then also the people that are going to be testifying in front of this group today. I want to introduce David Parkhurst, the EDC Committee Staff Director and Legal and Legislative Counsel. Thank you, David, for your work in guiding the committee. Appreciate that. Today's session complements really this morning's session, the NGA Chairman Governor Heinemann's Growing State Economies Initiative. As we learned this morning, the design of Governor Heinemann's initiative is to provide governors and other state policymakers with really better policies to improve the economic environment in their states and practical strategies, which I think is the key emphasis, designed to foster business growth and growing the economies. This afternoon, we'll explore how, as governors, we can lead efforts to create environments to help entrepreneurs thrive, as one of our speakers will testify, and achieve economic success. Our nation's success in the global economy starts in the states. States foster and encourage innovation, support industry sector clusters, and champion linkages between private firms, academic institutions, research labs, public sector. Opportunities exist for governors to help increase the attractiveness of our states and, in particular, support our entrepreneurs who create innovative new technologies and systems. Governors can lead the way, and often do, in creating the entrepreneurial culture that we need in America. My state, we're focused on this and what we can do to create a better business environment. We're focusing on key economic assets and clusters that we have, implementing policies to help our businesses best take advantage of those regional assets and strengths, facilitating relationships between our universities and private research institutions, created a new Office of the Repealer to focus on repealing outdated, antiquated regulations, championing education and training, and focusing on lowering personal income taxes to create a better environment. While traditional statutory and regulatory tools are important, the pace of global competition and technological innovation often occurs faster than government can process. This does not mean that government plays no role in creating a healthy entrepreneurial climate for global success, but it invites states to examine lessons learned by others that may help move us forward, each individually, states and as a country. Our session today will offer us a chance to distill universal lessons from successful entrepreneurs, identify ways governors as CEOs can help their states to improve the competitive positions of their states, and learn from successful entrepreneurs, academic researchers, and others. It's something we got to do, something we got to do as a country. With that, I want to invite Governor Nixon to offer any additional comments and then to introduce our panelists so we can get started. Jay?
Thank you, Governor Brownback. Also thank the Jayhawks for losing to us not only in football but basketball already this year. And for those folks on C-SPAN, we will complete this in time. We don't want to, the C-SPAN audience is such a crossover with the NCAA basketball audience that we wouldn't want to hurt the number of people watching that game. And so for those of you watching at home, you will have time to quickly switch to what you really want to do is watch college basketball rather than Brownback and I talk about basketball. Missouri is known as a show-me state. In Missouri, we're showing the nation how we can work together to create jobs, grow small businesses, and move our economy forward. We've focused on maintaining rigid fiscal discipline and creating a positive environment where businesses can grow. We've held the line on taxes, balanced our budget, preserved our spotless AAA credit rating. That gives businesses both large and small the confidence to invest in our state. We're also investing in education, college scholarships, and worker training, and also making sure that as far as businesses, we're working with small businesses across our state, the real drivers of job growth in our communities. One of my first acts as governor was to establish a special loan program specifically targeted to help small businesses move forward. Also, our small business credit initiative, we're investing about $27 million to help entrepreneurs in both high-tech and traditional industries turn their ideas into bricks, mortar, and jobs. We're also doing that with only 7 scholarship players on the University of Missouri basketball team this year. Efficient, effective use of scholarship dollars is what it takes to really deliver a winning program in the NCAA, I guess. With that, it's my job now to introduce the true experts who are with us today. We have a panel of distinguished presenters today that will help inform and lead our discussion. Amy Wilkinson is an entrepreneurship scholar with a joint appointment at the Woodrow Wilson International Center and Harvard University. Her interest and expertise centers on how leaders must change in order to influence today's entrepreneurial age. She is writing a book forthcoming from Simon & Schuster based on 250 interviews with high-impact entrepreneurs that will explain how innovation has altered traditional assumptions and will demonstrate how to harness this change. Amy has a diverse private and public sector background. She is an entrepreneur, having started and led a Mexican art export company, an investment banker with an MBA from Stanford University. Amy worked for McKinsey & Company as a strategic consultant. Amy also has public sector experience serving as a White House Fellow and Special Assistant to the U.S. Trade Representative. Amy will discuss key characteristics of high-impact entrepreneurs and then offer some practical policy solutions to help foster an entrepreneurial culture in our states. Jeff Weidman is Vice President of Global Business Development for the Procter & Gamble Company. He leads P&G's team of technology entrepreneurs to identify and deliver partnerships that drive innovation and create value across P&G and around the world. Jeff's team manages mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, joint ventures, equity investments, outsourcing, technology and trademark licensing, and P&G's connect and develop open innovation efforts. Jeff has also led development of the first ever comprehensive agreements between P&G and the public university systems of Ohio and Michigan to streamline how academia and business work together to drive breakthrough innovations and local business creation. His team forms civil agreements with government research institutes, academic entities, and entrepreneurs around the world. Jeff will talk about the P&G open innovation efforts and I believe present some results-oriented case studies. So let's begin. Amy, we look forward to your comments.
Thank you for that introduction. And thank you to the governors for focusing on entrepreneurship and for the National Governors Association for putting it on the agenda so prominently. I would like to start with a sentiment that is circulating among all of my entrepreneurial friends just this week. It goes like this. Dear optimist, pessimist, and realist, while you were arguing about the glass of water, I drank it. Signed, The Opportunist. This is very much the mantra and the mindset of entrepreneurs. I guess let me flip forward on this presentation. As mentioned this morning and as mentioned just now, really to create an ecosystem of entrepreneurship, you want high-impact entrepreneurs. You want the groups of people who will not only start companies, but scale companies. So it's absolutely fantastic to have 1- and 2-person businesses, but in order to create jobs and change cultures at the state level, certainly, you want people to scale those companies to a significant size. So the facts, the data here, are that 1% of young companies, age 3 to 5 years old really create more than 10% of net new jobs. That's an annual number. The data also show that in the last 3 decades in the United States, that firms less than 5 years old have created all the net new jobs. Yet, in the recession, so starting about at 2008, that changed. And this is worrisome. I mean, as people who lead states, this is really something to pay attention to, because starting around 2008, startups are starting smaller and they're staying smaller. And so the big question mark there is, what happens if our GDP comes back, but we're still 7 million jobs short? I mean, what happens if this engine doesn't create the jobs and doesn't create the innovation that we need? So really looking to high growth startups is an important thing to do. As mentioned, I've spent the last few years doing research on this segment of population that can scale a business over 100 million in revenue in less than 5 years. And so I can talk real quickly about some of the leadership characteristics that we see in that group. This is the quick aptitudes, the 6 aptitudes that I see. These people really find the gap, so they are spotting opportunities that other people don't see. They drive for daylight, which basically is managing speed like a NASCAR driver. They are orienting towards the horizon all the time, and they're looking for the light. They fly the OODA loop, and that is for observe, orient, decide, and act. That is fast cycle iteration. It's talked about a whole lot in Silicon Valley, and it's starting to ripple across the country in other management teams. They fail wisely. And by this, this is not a fear of failure. It's a real different mentality out there. It's about placing small bets. It's about innovating through small incremental innovations. And the idea is you avoid catastrophic mistakes. If you set failure ratios, you actually may want to fail 10% of the time or 5% of the time in order to know that you're pushing the envelope. Network minds. This is important, especially for people in this room. What I can see across the research set that I've done is that really there are new solution sets. No one can stay in a silo. You can't be a public sector leader only. You can't be an entrepreneur only. You can't be a scientist only. We'll see networked solution sets, and it's a lot more than social networking, right? This is people getting together and putting their brains together to figure out a new way to solve something. And then the last aptitudes that I see is about gifting small goods. And this basically is small kindnesses. We now live in a networked world. We are all linked together. And it's little tiny small favors can unlock an unbelievably tremendous value for a community. And so I'm happy to talk more about any of those characteristics. But since we're here as policymakers, let's shift to the missing ingredient, which is what do you do to get these high-impact entrepreneurs really going in your states? This is a roadmap. People, places, and policies. We can look at people. 4 segments of the population really are going to drive the future of entrepreneurship growth. And so here they are: baby boomers, Gen Y, immigrant or foreign-born entrepreneurs, and women. I love this picture. This is a little bit counterintuitive in that baby boomers are the fastest growing segment of the population to create jobs. So it's not necessarily who you think it is. It's people age 55 to 64 who are really getting out there to start new companies. And the Kauffman Foundation has got a lot of research on this. The average age of a first-time entrepreneur in the United States is 39. That surprises people, and in fact, it tilts towards a lot more people in the baby boomer age range than you would ever expect. There are 76 million people in that demographic, and they truly are going to redefine retirement. They may not retire, right? And there are reasons for that. Some of it is people are living longer, they're healthy longer. Some of it is economics based. Maybe they actually need to stay in the workforce. But we're really seeing them drive a lot of innovation and entrepreneurial growth. And as leaders of states, there are certain things to think about here. How do you tap into that population? I mean, they can not only start companies, they can be angel investors in companies. They certainly can be mentors. They can be advisors. There are certain places where they like to live. Making your regions, cities, states attractive to this demographic is important. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and an example is Bend, Oregon. It's amazing how many people like to retire in Bend, Oregon. It really is an example of a place that probably could do a lot to engage this enterprising boomer segment. Next segment, Gen Y entrepreneurs. This is a guy giving an elevator spiel, right? This is his 1-minute elevator pitch. This next generation of people coming up are really interested in being entrepreneurs. So 40% of young adults age 18 to 24 will say they want to go start a business. And 60% of Gen Y will actually say they'll be a serial entrepreneur. They've already started a company, and they believe that they will never go work for a large company. They're going to create their own job. So that's encouraging, I think, for the United States. The question mark here is, what do we do to educate these people to really know how to do that? So it comes right back to the education system. It's K through 12 education. It's also college programs for entrepreneurship. And I can give you a couple. I can highlight a couple that I hear all the time from entrepreneurs that are really working. So at the K through 12 level, high schools targeted towards STEM education. That is something that I hear over and over and over talked about as really important and a great preparation. And so there are some examples: North Carolina School for Science and Mathematics, Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy, Thomas Jefferson High School in Virginia, and the Texas T-STEM initiative. Those are ones that I continue to hear about as really good models for STEM education at the K through 12 level. Another thing that I hear about is project-based learning. And so this is another thing that I know different high schools are experimenting with it. But instead of having teachers teach directly at a class of students, this idea is 12 to 20 students get together and work on a project. They're certainly guided by teachers also there in the classroom. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, entrepreneurs work in groups. Right? They work in teams. Nobody starts a company completely alone. So it's very different than our current education system. Our current education system is testing individuals. They take individual tests, and if they collaborate with anyone, we call it cheating. Right? In the entrepreneurial system, you have to collaborate all the time, and the idea is, how can you work together and how can you learn together? And so I think that's a really important thing to think about, trying to foster at every level of education. Another example that I love is FIRST Robotics. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with FIRST, but it's an additional sort of outside of the high school, junior high and high school experience with building a robot. So we were talking about sports, right? And this is the sport. Dean Kamen, the founder, says every human being can go pro, right? Everybody can be a pro athlete at critical thinking. So if you can think about building a robot, it teaches you math, science, engineering. It teaches you all the things that you really, really need to be good at for the whole rest of your life. And so as an example of supplemental learning, I think FIRST Robotics is something that every single student should know about in every single state. So shifting a little bit to the college level, there are examples. It's the same logic, which is working in groups, working in teams, learning through projects. There are examples at the college level. Launchpad at the University of Miami is doing this in an unbelievable way. So is the Syracuse Student Sandbox, and so is Stanford X or StartX at Stanford University. They're all programs at the college level that are taking student entrepreneurs and partnering them with angel investors, potentially, alumni entrepreneurs, certainly faculty, other students. They're cross-collaborative. It's not just the business school. I was a Stanford MBA. It's not just in the Stanford Business School. This is across the medical school, the law school, the arts academies, the design school. It's really a very interesting thing to see piloted at the university level, and any university could do this. Any community college could do this. It's an important thing to try to replicate. Now, shifting forward, foreign-born entrepreneurs. And I realize immigration is a little bit of a contentious topic. It's certainly not something that states can address without also working a lot with the federal level. But it's an important thing for championing at the state, local, regional level. Foreign-born entrepreneurs are representing 30% of all new business owners in the United States, and 25% of the high-tech startups. This is most of Silicon Valley. Has a lot of it has at least one founder who's foreign-born. So these are companies, there's some logos on the presentation that you know, Google, eBay, PayPal, Yahoo, and I will say here, I spent 7 years at Stanford. Those companies all had founders that were students on our campus, and they literally were like all the other students. So, you know, there are a lot of international students on university campuses. The guys that started up these companies weren't any different. They looked for partners. In all cases, they partnered with American students. And so they were immigrant founders partnering with American founders. They needed help. They needed faculty. They needed to bounce ideas off of other people. They needed local angel investors. They scaled those companies up out of Stanford University, and yes, they had foreign-born founders, but they did a tremendous amount for that region, obviously, and they've done a tremendous amount for the world in terms of changing the way we all communicate and we find information. So the foreign-born founder segment is something, especially at the university, it ties to the university. There are plenty of people that are saying we need to staple a green card to the back of STEM diplomas, right? Or we need an entrepreneurship visa to attract this demographic of people. We really don't want them leaving our states. We don't want them going back to Shanghai or Shenzhen or Dubai or anywhere else that they would go back to. We need to figure out a way, as in the examples of these companies, to get these people to stay anywhere in our states, but don't leave, especially if we've educated you in our universities. We want these people to stay and innovate in the United States. And then the final point is, on the demographics here, is women. And this is really near and dear to my heart. I was an investment banker for JP Morgan, and I honestly believe that women are the undervalued asset class. And that means that women can be entrepreneurs, and we don't see them right now, very much in this segment, especially not in the high growth segment. And that's a real question mark. There are some statistics that I think are in some ways troubling and in some ways cool. Women are 46% of the workforce, 50% of college students, 51% of our PhDs, and last year, 70% of the valedictorians. Like, girls are smart. And so, for any of you who haven't figured that out yet, right? And why do we not see them starting up companies? In my research set, I'll be honest and say it's really hard to find examples of companies that have scaled over 100 million in revenue in less than 5 years that have women as founders. And I can give you a couple examples. Stella and Dot is a phenomenal company. The same woman out of Stanford undergrad and business school, she started weddingchannel.com, and now she's starting a jewelry business. Rapid growth businesses in both cases. There's another example called the Gilt Group. It's a fashion, online flash sale luxury group headquartered in New York. So they may be in industries that you think of as girly industries, but these are unbelievably crackerjack companies that have scaled up. They're hard to find. And there are a couple reasons. There's some research, actually, behind this. Why aren't women doing this? Access to capital is one thing. Babson College has put out a report that says if women had equal access to capital as men, that they would create 6 million jobs in less than 5 years. Like, that should get our attention. 6 million jobs in less than 5 years. 2 million jobs in the first year alone. And so, question mark, like, let's get some capital to these women, right? Another reason that there's done, University of Wisconsin's done some research on women, it's self-perceptions. Women can work 15 years in an industry and not think they're ready to start a company on their own. And so some of that is just women need to get out and change the self-perception of what they can do. Another piece of research is the networks piece, which is they don't have access to mentors and advisors, and that becomes the real importance of accelerators like Astia. There's a group in Silicon Valley that's championing women entrepreneurs in particular. But for governors or for states, there's some things that you can do. You can give more visibility to women entrepreneurs. You can try to put them on science and technology boards. that's a real great way to expand networks. Where there are examples, you can champion in them, because seeing role models that are women, that are high-growth entrepreneurs, that does a lot to get other women to go out and do the same thing. So those are some ideas to try to get that going. Now, places. So shifting to not the people, but the places of innovation, largely university-based innovation hubs. And there are 3 recommendations here. I'm going to speed up a little bit. Tech transfer offices. This is the crazy scientist, the mad scientist that stays in the lab. We actually want to commercialize all this research out of universities, and there are some suggestions on how we might be able to do that. Speeding the commercialization of faculty innovation is important. Like right now, more than half of nanotechnology companies, for example, have a faculty founder. And this is a growth space. And so I was at a conference recently where all the nanotechnology faculty were really upset because they have great ideas and they get sort of jammed up, clogged up in this technology transfer office system at their university to commercialize. And they can be overtaken. The market can pass them by while the university system is not commercializing their idea. That's tremendously frustrating to the nanotech professors that I was talking to, for example. But, you know, as governors or as leaders of states, you could really encourage universities to adopt a standardized licensing agreement for spin-outs of companies, for example, or you could go to a free agency model where faculty could go anywhere to license. But those are certainly ideas because there's great innovations happening and not getting to the market. Another idea is innovation vouchers. So here's the coupon lady. Other countries, particularly European countries, are using innovation vouchers. And the idea here, it would be something to potentially try. The idea is a voucher of, say, $5,000 or $7,000. They're not really large amounts of money, going to a small or medium-sized enterprise, that enterprise being able to cash it in at a university, and then that leads to an immediate collaboration between the small growth company and a university faculty member that might help prototype an idea or feasibility test an idea or do some other research of value to small and medium-sized companies. So the Netherlands Innovation Voucher Program is a really good example of this, and there are phenomenal results. I'll tell you a tiny bit about the results out of those kinds of programs. 80% of the R&D investment in startups in the Netherlands have come out of this small and medium-sized voucher program. 60% of the small and medium-sized enterprises say they will continue to do knowledge transfer type business, even when the voucher is expired. So if you have a one-year voucher thing, it establishes the relationships between these cross-sector partners, and they continue to talk together and work together. Another idea, and this may be controversial, but I hear it being talked about, and that is realigning the incentives, especially for state universities. Could you reallocate some of the budget to reflect economic development goals in the region? And so, you know, as leaders of the state, could you encourage universities to try to do research related to industry clusters? Could you have technical assistance go towards local companies? And that wouldn't cost anything in terms of increasing a state budget. It would just be an allocation adjustment. If universities in your state were interested in trying to do more of that kind of thing, maybe they would get a little bit more of a budget directed towards them. Now, clearly, metrics are pretty important here on how would you measure that. So it could be patents received, it could be licensing income. There would have to be quite a lot of discussion around what would make that fair or what would even make this a possibility. But it's something that I hear talked about as an idea for innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems. And then finally, turning to the policies. We've talked a little bit about policies, but I have 3 real simple things to think about. 1, a one-stop shop to register a new business. Lots of entrepreneurs are not policy wonks, right? And you talk to these people, they do not like paperwork. They don't like getting troubled with, you know, how to register and how long it takes and where to go and who to talk to. It's a totally different kind of person that's starting up a company, and streamlining this process with an online website or trying to make it a lot easier for people is something that governors and leaders across states could all be getting together to do. I like to think of it like the TurboTax, right? If we can have TurboTax and everyone can do their own taxes now, why is it so hard to register a business? It really doesn't need to be that hard. It feels like, to me, that you could call up Intuit and try to get some kind of a back office solution for the states and tweak it for each individual state and say, okay, let's make this a website where people can come and very, very quickly figure out how to register not only for some of the business things, but maybe it could have add-on legal services or patenting services or other things that businesses also need. We should be trying to make this as easy as possible. Example here is Portugal. So Portugal does have a firm online program, and this is a surprise. I don't necessarily think of Portugal as being massively efficient, but in this way, they've done an amazing thing for registering small businesses, and the results are very, very visible. So 60,000 new Portuguese companies have registered in less than 2 years. This thing has been working. So it's something to think about. It's something that hopefully wouldn't be that hard to stand up. A web mentor matching program. As mentioned this morning, mentorship is really key. And this is part of the learning process. Entrepreneurs are really on their own, right? So entrepreneurs, many of them in small teams, are trying to figure out how to make things happen. Having somebody to call, having an experienced person who's seen these things before, done these things before, or that can just bounce ideas with you back and forth and try to improve your thinking before you go out and invest your own money or someone else's money. The mentorship system is really important, and having an online system would facilitate mentorship in your states. You could have executives that are retired and living in one part of your state mentor somebody on the complete opposite side of the state. You can do it by phone, you can do it by video conferencing. I mean, you don't have to live locally right next to somebody to be their mentor. And so I think this potentially would unlock a lot of value. You would have to vet the startups and you'd have to vet the mentors. You don't want to waste anybody's time, right? I mean, you would have to make sure that the startups were real deal startups and that they had experienced people trying to do important work there, and you'd have to have experienced mentors. You don't want anyone to just sign up and say they're a mentor and give bad advice. And so there would definitely have to be some thinking through on that to make it work. But I think it's potentially important. And then finally, tax policy. And this is somewhat inconclusive, right? And so the recommendation here is we probably need to study this more. There are lots of different approaches. The Kauffman Foundation is making the recommendation that simplicity and a wide base on corporate income tax structure is really the way to go. With that said, across the states, 41 states offer corporate income tax exemptions, 45 offer incentives for job creation, 49 are using sales tax exemptions on new equipment. I mean, it's really complicated. Everybody has different ideas about how to make this work. If you're an entrepreneur, you want transparency, you want it to be decluttered, and you want to have some visibility into what it will look like in the future as well in order to be able to plan your business. So simplicity here for entrepreneurs is probably the way to go. And then the new paradigm, I'll just close by saying it's possible to build entrepreneurial ecosystems, and I've seen it really in my own life. I grew up just south of Seattle, and Seattle was not a thriving place 30 years ago. In fact, there was a sign that went up on I-5 that basically said, "Would the last person out of Seattle please turn out the lights?" And it's kind of legendary in the Pacific Northwest because it's when Boeing was leaving. And between timber and Boeing, those were the industries that were really driving Seattle. And it was not an easy place necessarily to grow up. There wasn't a huge amount of opportunity, or it wasn't as much as certainly there is today in Seattle. And that's the point. I mean, today Seattle has got Microsoft. It certainly has Nordstrom's. It has Starbucks, Costco, Amazon.com, a huge amount of biotech. It's an unbelievably thriving city. It's a model for, I think, what we want to look like in a global economy, and that's happened in the last 30 years. And so I think it's a pilot, and it's something to look at and try to see what exactly happened in Seattle and how can other regions do that. in some cases, people will point and say, hey, it has to do with technology. I mean, Microsoft is there. Microsoft has driven a huge amount of innovation. So has Amazon.com. But the examples that I like to point to in Seattle are Costco and Starbucks. Right? This is not high tech. This is high skill, maybe in terms of apprenticeship skill and other workforce training programs and like that. But Costco is employing right now 150,000 employees, and Starbucks has got 140,000 employees. That's a lot of job creation in a non-tech environment in Seattle. And so I think it's just something to point to, something to look at. And I'll close by saying I hope the governors will be very entrepreneurial themselves and will test some of these ideas in the local states. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Jeff, thank you for joining us today. Your microphone.
Thank you, Governor. You know, as I thought about being here today, I kind of thought, what am I going to talk about? And I promised my government affairs people that invited me that I would not turn this into a commercial. But I have to say, with the C-SPAN lights, I am able to see which of you used a Gillette razor this morning and which of you didn't. You know, Amy and I are going to end up talking about a lot of the same things, but from a slightly different perspective. I hope that you'll find the comments that I make today pragmatic and practical. And I'm going to give you some case studies. And the goal, which you can tell me afterward if we've achieved it, is to actually give you 2 or 3 tips that you can focus on that maybe you can actually start using on Monday. I'm going to start with a quote. And I liked your data, by the way. I like this quote, too. Small companies are both the greatest creators of new jobs and the greatest destroyers of jobs because small companies fail so often. Well, our job at Procter & Gamble, and I think your job even more so, is how can we help these small companies grow and not fail? P&G is really, really committed to helping foster entrepreneurial growth for a couple of reasons. One is small companies are the source of great ideas, innovation, energy. They're also our consumers. A vibrant, healthy economy creates more consumers, so more consumers can buy Tide and buy Gillette. I'm passionate about this, both personally and professionally, because I think the government and businesses can do more to enable entrepreneurial growth than we've done historically. I've been working on this for a number of years, more than I care to admit, but my hair was black when I started. I'm going to focus on 3 key opportunities that I think state governments can do starting on Monday, and you'll see some overlap in terms of the things that you did. One is help universities, research institutions be more business friendly. Number 2, help entrepreneurs and startups connect with more potential partners, including larger enterprises, because small companies staying small are not going to be sufficient. We want them to grow big. And last of the 3 things I want to talk about today is how do you help support development of capital funding to foster and support startups? Now, all 3 of these were highlighted. We recently in the greater Cincinnati region, we started a project. Our CEO was the co-chair. And we said, how do we create an entrepreneurial economy, a better one in the greater Cincinnati area? Well, one of the things we learned is we didn't know what was going on. We actually went outside and hired McKinsey & Company to support us on this effort, to help us build a fact base of what was going on. We went out, we talked to a lot of entrepreneurs. We talked to a lot of VCs. We talked to angel investors. You know, it wasn't just what we thought, and as we started the project, the description of the greater Cincinnati region was kind of like the old description of the elephant. It depends on where you're talking and where you're touching. These collectively helped us form a view of the landscape and also helped lead us to what we needed to do. And frankly, this is not just about Cincinnati. I think it plays out in every city, every state in the country. The areas for focus that we worked on are really in 3 areas: ideas, people and environment, and capital. And as we go into these, I don't have time to go through all of these today, and I actually have a roadmap that says where the gaps are within our region, but also I suspect each of your states and regions have gaps in different areas, and there were surprises in this. And so we're only going to focus on the 3 or 4 that are highlighted there, and I'm going to get to the seed investment as one of the recommendations later. The first one, and it was interesting, we did not compare notes beforehand, did we? Making universities, research institutions more business friendly. I got to tell you something, today's reality, it takes too long to build relationships and partnerships with your universities. In my organization, we've talked to many around the states and also across the globe. There's too much red tape. It's too focused on IP. It's too focused sometimes on metrics of how much licensing revenue. We actually think sometimes that gets in the way. There's too many other good things. And I have to tell you that the U.S. is getting beaten by global competition. I had, from my Procter & Gamble experience, it's easier to work with a university in the UK than it is in the States. And I'm going to explain a little bit of why that is. They're more competitive, they're more aggressive, they're more forward-thinking. So let me talk a little bit about what's working and give you some examples. We have a relationship with Durham University. That's not the one in North Carolina, and I guess I should have commented on. I'm a student of a graduate of a Big Ten university. Should I have made some basketball comments there? I mean, we believe we're the birthplace, but I'll leave that alone. This is the Durham that's in the UK. They've done something fascinating. They formed an institute within their university that brings together the multidisciplines so that when a business engagement occurs, we don't have to go department by department. They do it for us. We have ended up investing money with that university to do applied research, and you know what? They do the work inside to bring those things together. I'm a business guy. Entrepreneurs, they don't have time to go department to department. They also have pre-worked the IP rights. It's simple. It works for us. We don't have to do that work internally. We also go to Singapore. A-STAR, okay, which is a government agency, not only includes their universities, but also includes their labs, their national labs, their regional labs, as part of this collaborative agreement. When we have a need, a Procter & Gamble or an entrepreneur, they can call. We can call them and say, do you have anything in this space? They bring those parties together. Technology transfer offices, I have to be careful here, we work with a lot of them. We much prefer to work with business engagement offices. Technology transfer offices in your universities are largely held accountable for meeting the need of the professor, hard to do. How much revenue did they generate? That means they want to negotiate and negotiate and negotiate and negotiate. Okay? This is about creating businesses, solving needs, making connections between the company, whether it's an entrepreneur or a big company, and that university. The Michigan and Ohio, the Governor Nixon mentioned this. We have statewide agreements with the state university system in those states. The state of Ohio, it took us, it was interesting, one of the members of the administration said, we're going to do this. And I lost a bet because he said we're going to have it done by May. I bet 2 years hence in May, they got it done. It's not far enough. Michigan did it in 90 days, okay? We pre-negotiated 85% of the boilerplate that happens, but still there's things that have to happen beyond that. I don't think it went far enough. I mean, it's further than any other state that we've done business with at this point, but it doesn't go far enough because it doesn't have things in it that says, you know, if you create jobs in our state, or if this does create jobs, you're going to get preferred licensing rights and things. We still have to negotiate those kinds of things. And oh, by the way, did I mention that's what we already have in the UK and in Singapore and things like that. I would challenge you, this is not about just getting more revenue, it's about more business engagement. But I'm very pleased, and as a resident of Ohio, and my wife's a resident of, or came from Michigan, I'm not being critical, I'm saying that's a good step in the right direction, but it needs to go a lot further. Connecting entrepreneur startups with potential partners, including large enterprise. Today's reality is it's hard for startups to knock on the right door in big companies or even small companies to represent themselves. And I have to tell you, it's hard for big companies to see all that's out there. Last year, my department had over 4,400 unsolicited ideas come to us. Okay? That's from around the globe. Okay? I actually know how many entrepreneurs from each of your states have registered at our website. We believe innovation is a democracy. Okay? We'll take good ideas from wherever they come from. But I don't want to have to see and talk to everyone associated with it. Okay? We say no thank you to the vast majority. We also are pinging. We develop networks to say, do you have something that could help us with this problem? And we send those out to university networks, alumni networks, science labs. We try to build networks because we're looking for solutions to help us accelerate our innovation. So what we tend to look for is how, in fact, do we make these kinds of connections? And I will tell you, we like smart agents. Okay? I mentioned the UK. I'm going to jump to the second one there, IPSRC. It's the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. This is a government agency. When we have something that we need to solve, we go to IPSRC, if it's in their area. They have similar departments for the other sciences. And we say, do you have something that would solve this kind of surface technology? That organization doesn't say, why don't you go talk to Durham, or why don't you go talk to Leeds, or why don't you go talk? They don't do that. They go, we'll get back to you. They go off. They pre-qualify 3 or 4 different things. And when they come back, they say, does this meet your need? The hit rate is phenomenal. And we say, wow, we want to work with that university. The university puts in capability. P&G puts in capability. And are you listening? IPSRC puts in money. That's the kind of competition we're facing here in the U.S. And what comes out of that is technology that we have preferred rights to in our fields of use, but it also overlaps with that university's educational mission. It's a wonderful recruiting tool because guess what? When we're working with that university, we're seeing their students. Okay? Our hiring tends to be preferenced coming out of those places because we have 2-year, 3-year, if it's postdocs, 3 or 4 years that they're actually interviewing. We also look for smart agents. There's a little company called Yet2.com up in Boston that we've been a tiny, tiny investor in. When the principals from Yet2.com call and say, Jeff, here's something you ought to look at. Guess what? I look at it. Because they understand our needs. I want to ask you, does your development organizations, do they know what these entrepreneurs' needs are? Okay? I like websites. I like having things posted. It's necessary, it's not sufficient. This smart agent piece is a full contact sport, okay? It's Big Ten basketball, okay? You got to understand the needs of the entrepreneur, the needs of the big company, the capabilities that exist, and really make the match between those and help drive it through. It's Amy's point in terms of you've got to have one place to call and someone that's going to drive it. The last piece I want to talk about is help development of capital funding sources. Today's reality, startups can't secure financing, okay? An underfunded entrepreneur is a risk for a big business. These people knock on my door. Jeff, we've got this great technology. I go, wow, that is pretty good. I might be interested in using that. Can you deliver that to our business in Europe and in Latin America and do that within the next 90 days? Of course they can. We need capabilities that come from other places to help this kind of funding. You know, growing a small supplier and partnering to a global one mandates they have to have the capital to grow. And I'll tell you, much as you'd like it, big business, medium businesses can't be the sole banker. I will also tell you that I think you have a role to play here. Capital funding development, I think governments can help, but you shouldn't be the sole banker. But you do need to provide incentives. You need to provide incentives so that people can co-invest with labs, universities, private sector. You have to incentivize seed capital. When we did this survey in the greater Cincinnati area, one of the surprises we had was our seed capital was actually overdeveloped relative to the rest of the U.S. There were lots of little seedlings that were being grown. If they have the yield rate of most startups, we don't have enough early stage capital. you need to find ways to incentivize early stage capital. Let me give you an example. Remember this chart that I showed you? This was the work that McKinsey did for us and stuff like that. In terms of the seed investment, we concluded that there was not, we didn't have to do anything to help the seed capital. The state of Ohio actually had a program. I don't see the governor of Kentucky here, but I saw in the paper over the last week that Kentucky's doing more to incentivize, provide tax benefits for angel investors that will invest in seed businesses. We've concluded regionally that we're going to need to put together a fund of funds that's going to be really targeted against early stage. What happens when those yield? You can incentivize businesses to do that, investors to do that. For us, it's about creating an environment where these entrepreneurs can grow and become local institutions and build for us. So if you go back to the quote, small companies are the greatest, creators, and small companies are also the greatest destroyers. I have to tell you, P&G is committed to supporting small business growth. They're our consumers. They're our source of innovation. We believe we can get there by partnering, incubating, coaching, being really, really good clients. I always say to these small companies that show up, I go, I may not put equity in it. I've got something better. I may be a customer, and as a customer, we pay our bills. Okay? That's real important for startups to have a beta customer. Helping them to grow, to create jobs, stay in the community, and improve our communities is something that we think is very important. And we believe that there's a strong role for your state governments to do the same thing, to partner with us in doing that work, to support small business growth. I think there's still going to be losers, okay? This is a marketplace. Not all startups make it. But getting it to be a good marketplace where they're not failing because they don't have access to the embedded capability that exists in each of your states is a good thing. We've got to get beyond that. We've got to make that connection. We want more winners and we want bigger winners. So that's my comments. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy and Jeff. Appreciate your comments, and I thought those were quite good and very useful. I've got a number of notes here that I've taken. What I'd like to do here is I'm going to start off with the first question, then go to the governor of Missouri, and then open up across the floor for different individuals that'd like to ask of either of these individuals or maybe engage a thought with a broader group if that's the way you'd like to go. I'd start off this first one with Amy because you raised the issue on university incentives, and this is something I think all of us struggle with, work with. We fund universities in our states. Each of us, I think, try to fund them pretty aggressively and then want to try to get as much back out of it as we can for our state and for the people of our state and the students. So last year, we took a portion of our funding for our universities and ran it through our Department of Commerce instead of through the Board of Regents as a way of trying to incent creating a job-creating atmosphere with it, thinking, well, maybe if we go this route and we put some metrics with it, that would be a better route to do. Do either of you have thoughts of how you might use the budget process to create more entrepreneurial environments at our universities? Do you have any thought that would come to mind?
Well, I mean, I can relay on what I've been hearing people talk about, which would be, and I'm not sure if it's the same thing that you're talking about or it's already been done, but what I hear entrepreneurs talking about is, could the state budgets have metrics around things like patents licensed out of universities or licensing income or
instead of journal article, or maybe
right.
In addition to journal articles, you also you give marks for
right.
those sort of features.
I mean, the heart of the problem, I think, is that the universities and faculty at universities, and I'm inside of a university right now, I mean, they're all tenured and they're all interested in what they're interested in, which may or may not have anything to do with regional, local economic development goals. And so the question mark is, can you get faculty interested in, through these incentives, can you reallocate a portion of the state budget by saying to whatever the state university is, if you actually have outputs, the metrics are more companies spun out into our region in fields that matter to this region, then we'll give you a larger portion of our budget. And it'll work in bigger states that have, 3 or more state-funded universities. I don't know if this works as well in smaller states. If it creates competition between universities at the state level because they would like more of the state budget, I think that's where it could work.
That's a good thought. Jeff?
Yeah, I think that I get worried about licensing revenue because it empowers technology transfer offices to focus on each individual deal. And I think that you should be focused on a broader economic footprint. So here are my qualifying questions when I show up at a university. Every university I go to tells me they're world class in pretty much everything. And so I ask this qualifying question: how many new companies have you started?
Right.
How many spin-outs have happened from your faculty? And by the way, Amy, you're right. It's publish or perish. It's not part of the reward system in terms of starting up companies. Finding ways that the reward system within the universities allows professors to benefit or maybe even get tenure, I don't know. I mean, taking on university culture is an interesting challenge. Right. The second question I ask, which most fail, is how many of those new businesses have been started by your students? I mean, this is something where the culture is such that you saw how many of the Gen Ys want to start their own business. Let them start while they're at your university. Guess what? If they start a business there, they're more likely to have a better education because it's all of a sudden it's wow, this is how it really works. And number two, if it works, their roots are there. And you want to keep your university kids at home, I suspect.
Let me follow up just briefly and go to Jay. Do you think we have the wrong incentives in place for our state universities in this country to create better economic development, better job creating machines? Do we have are the wrong incentives in place presently?
Well, I don't believe the incentives are in place to do that. I mean, inside of a university, I don't see people talking about let's create jobs. I don't think it's happening. It's not, well, with an exception, MIT in Boston, MIT is a powerhouse, and they are doing this, and there's research out. Kauffman Foundation has put out a report on MIT and the extended network of MIT alums that are entrepreneurs, the engineering and science and technology faculty that are involved there, and the university as a whole. That would be a good model to look at. Stanford is obviously another one, but MIT has done a very good job, and I think a lot of that is internal culture. They also set up cross-collaboration across departments inside of the university. That's something that should be encouraged. Because I spent 7 years at Stanford, Stanford has championed a big initiative on that in the last, 4 or 5 years as well. Get your faculty to talk to each other, because not only do they not talk to the regional players, small and medium-sized enterprises, they don't really even talk to each other. And so changing the culture inside of a university is very difficult to do, but there are some models, and I would really point to the MIT example as one that works.
While I respect Stanford and MIT, they're incredible institutions. I think many of us have in our states organizations which, like community colleges and regional colleges, that also are very involved in their local economies, but aren't necessarily on the cutting edge of nanotechnology, but do have people that start businesses and whatnot. What ideas would you have to make connections at those community college levels or at those regional college levels, either public or private, that could engender business growth without necessarily inventing something brand new that requires significant research dollars or PhD? Jeff?
Yeah, I have to say I've not done a lot of work with community colleges and things like that, other than I have had some of those administrators come and visit with us, and in a lot of ways, and I don't know if this was a uniquely our region, but some of those administrators were actually oversubscribed on service curriculum. They sell out, the one university administrator, they sell out every one of their hairdresser, cosmetics, licensing classes. They sell out their welding, plumbing. They can't get enough, they don't have enough money to actually run people through that. So I think there's some things that can be done at the community college level. I would also say that okay, you're not Stanford, you're not MIT, but we see really cool initiatives by other universities and departments within universities around the globe. And so things that you can do, what is the world-class department? Okay? Do you have in one of your business areas, do you have a lot of small manufacturing that are all doing their own prototyping work? Can you combine that? Can you incentivize prototyping so that you can actually draw more to that? Do you have that kind of capability? I also think that just the incentive, it's kind of interesting. I get a little worried when I hear people talk about how do you change the incentives. It's the politics of universities are something that just are amazing. I mean, their time frame is semesters, academic years, not minutes, not days, like entrepreneurs. So I give you a piece of coaching. It's called the young faculty. They get it. Don't make it a broad peanut butter program that spreads across everything evenly. Find ways that young faculty coming in, maybe they don't have tenure yet, but they have an opportunity to start their own business. I bet if you started asking the question, how many startups have come out of your university, okay, you're going to get some shocking data. And here's the test. See how old the examples are that they give you.
I'd like to add one thing there. The Launchpad program, this is University of Miami. This is, I think, the model program right now. And it's been replicated in 2 different colleges in Detroit and 1 in North Carolina. It's new, and basically any university or community college could be looking at this. I mean, the University of Miami is way out in front on collaborative entrepreneurship in terms of getting alums together with their students, getting support of the larger community, and it's got great results. And so I think if you want to look at a program that's not MIT or Stanford, really look at this University of Miami Launchpad program. I think we'll see it do a whole lot of great things in the future.
I'll give you one other example because I think that's we're familiar with that one. Go take a look at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. They lost a big client, or the Michigan lost a really big business there, drug company. Michigan has a program where they have an entrepreneurial institute. I serve on the advisory board. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm blown away. These are student-started companies. They're faculty-started companies. They have physical space. They're building relationships with universities across the globe. Entrepreneurs can go in and get consulting help. Students who are going through their business programs can start their own company. They can consult. They even have one of the few investment funds that's student-run. Okay? They act as VCs. Students actually put money in, manage money and stuff like that. There are examples, and we'd be happy to follow up and give you kind of where we see these pockets around the globe of things that I think are doable. And it's out there. There are sprouts growing.
Well, sounds good. Governor Herbert of Utah wanted to ask a question.
Well, thank you. And being we have the theme of college rivalry week here going, I'd like to just note that 6 years ago we started a very aggressive program for working with research and development and startups transitioning into the private sector, and we just passed the last 2 years MIT at the University of Utah as the #1 startup for small businesses out of research and development of our University of Utah. So it's a good model, and we're probably proof that that works, that if you set your mind to it, you can actually make a change. And Jeff, we certainly want to welcome you to Utah. First manufacturing plant in I think the United States in 40 years is now headquartered in just north of Salt Lake City, so we're glad to have Procter & Gamble there. My question really is for you, Amy. I've heard twice today about the fact that we need to, with those students who are coming to the United States, getting degrees in engineering, technology, math, science, we ought to attach a visa to them or a green card of some kind. And maybe that's certainly something we ought to consider doing. But the more important question, I think, is why is it we cannot grow our own? Why do we not have enough of our own students going into science, technology, engineering, and math? We have people coming from outside our borders to our schools and getting a good education. Why can't we grow from within?
Okay, well, I think we need to do both, right? So I think we need to attract the world's best talent into the United States. I think we've had a history of being able to do that in the past, and we need to continue to do that. The question on why are we not doing it, growing our own STEM, science, technology, math, talent at home? I think that our education system is broken. I don't think it's working. I don't think that's a headline to anybody in this room. I'm sure all the governors are spending a lot of time working on K through 12 education. I think, there are different conversations. Do we need another Sputnik moment? Do we need to inspire people in a different way? I think there are plenty of people now who see technology as cool. I mean, Google, Facebook, Twitter, technology is pretty sexy these days. And so I actually think it's changing our K through 12 education system in some of the ways I mentioned, maybe project-based learning, maybe high schools that are targeted for STEM education. But that's where I think we need to attack it at home. And I think maybe it's carrying the message that nerds do rule the world. I mean, honestly, if you look around, Bill Gates still has bangs, right? I mean, it's crazy. Well, it really is. It's something that I think it's just a different way of thinking about things. And I think science, math, technology is becoming very cool.
Well, and I think it's something we need to really address seriously, because I don't know whether it's the education system is broken, could be improved, whether we're not channeling people into the right courses, we're not aligning K through 12 with post-high school education and the alignment necessary for the market demands out there. If it's cultural, if we're just lazy. Certainly the economic rewards seem to be there, so you'd think that in itself would compel people to get into a line of work that would pay a great dividend with their education. But I'm puzzled that what it is that we need to be doing differently to get our own people to become the next scientists, the next engineers, the technicians. We certainly have seen that with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and they've seemed to have done all right, but why we're not getting enough, why we're having to import more into our country that we can produce is a puzzlement to me.
I'll make one more comment, and this is back to FIRST Robotics. So Dean Kamen is an inventor. He's the Segway inventor, among other things. He's the founder of FIRST Robotics. And I've interviewed him for my book, for my research, and he attacks this very problem. And what he says is our culture has, and we see it today, we've made sports really cool. We talk about sports here, we pay athletes an enormous amount of money, right? And so we worship sports in the United States. The other thing we worship is celebrity. We make Hollywood really, unbelievably interesting, and we pay actors a whole lot of money. And so the model behind FIRST Robotics is to try to make building a robot cool. It's trying to make math, science, technology, engineering the sport that we would all talk about. And so, instead of talking about basketball, would we talk about, hey, let's build a robot and let's get the robot to play basketball? Because honestly, that's what FIRST Robotics does. It's kids in junior high school and high school building robots to play floor sports. And I encourage everybody to go to one of these things. It's amazing to see. I watched the regional championships here in DC, and not only, are the kids in teams building robots, the robots are throwing balls around. There's it's like a fair, it's like a carnival. Everyone's eating food on the side. There's cheerleaders. The U.S. Patent and Trade Office has got scouts. They're looking, it's crazy. It is just like sports. And so, to how do you turn it around? I think you look at models like FIRST Robotics and you try to make math and science really exciting for kids.
Well, sorry for talking about sports to open the meeting off here. I apologize. Feeling really bad now. But I'm glad you talked about nerds, because we have a lot in the room here. So, that fits us well. Governor Walker, you had asked for the next question.
See, thank you for referring to nerds and then calling on me next. Thank you. And actually, on that last point, that's interesting. I don't think talking about sports is bad, but talking in the same vein, I think of the University of Wisconsin talking about the football team when we beat Dave in Nebraska earlier, although they'll probably turn it around on us next year talking about basketball like you guys are talking about. There's probably not enough of us as fans who talk about with the same pride that the University of Wisconsin exceeds $1 billion in academic research and development, yet that's, in terms of job impact, probably much greater than just what the score of the game is. We should be applauding both. But you spent a lot of time, and thank you both, Jeff and Amy, for being here. One thing, Amy, you said in particular that struck me when you talked about the 4 segments of growth, You actually mentioned a University of Wisconsin report on barriers to women in being entrepreneurs. I'm curious, though, in all your interviews, you mentioned access to capital, and that if female entrepreneurs had greater access to capital in the next, 5 years, you said 6 million jobs. Why is that? I mean, and the people that you're talking to, both entrepreneurs who are successful, how did they get access to capital? And for those who didn't, or those who heard of female entrepreneurs seeking to get access to capital, what are the barriers? And I think that would enlighten us in some ways to what we could do to help change that.
Yeah, so this is just starting to be researched. To be honest, Kauffman Foundation has just put out a report on women in entrepreneurship. Babson College is the data on that 6 million job creation number. Different people are going to have different data sets. This is the problem with entrepreneurship data, is it's very hard to get, and it seems to be somewhat anecdotal. That being said, I refer you probably to the Kauffman study. What that says, and what I see in my research, is networks. And so women don't know as many venture capitalists. They don't know as many angel investors. And people tend to fund those they know. People tend to fund those they've heard about. And so it's not a gender-based issue, really. It's just if I don't know you, I don't even know how to ask you to fund my business. Or if I don't have a friend of a friend of a friend that has once been venture-backed or angel-backed, the way women are funding their companies, a lot of it's on credit cards. It's their own money. Friends and family money is the way a lot of entrepreneurs fund. But access to networks that would even make the introductions for women is, I think, the real driver of that. And so it's less of a gender issue and more of a networks issue.
Have those, just a quick follow-up, have those that you found that were successful, was it then because they either had personal networks, or were there programs, and were there in the areas, the communities they're in, were there in things that were driven to drive them into those sort of network relationships, or where were those that were successful that you talked to?
Yeah, so the ones that I see in my research that were successful came out of Stanford University Business School, Harvard Business School. That ties you to a network. I mean, not only is that sort of a nice stamp to be able to say I was educated at this place, it gives you alumni to call at the venture capital firms or at the angel, I guess they're not firms, but it puts you in touch with people. The other thing that I see is women who were successful, like at eBay early. eBay is now an older company. They've gone on to start tech businesses themselves, but puts them in a network of the original eBay team, right? Or an original, and so it's either networks of having been at a company that succeeded, or it's networks that out of a university that gave them connections. So I think if you're looking to try to support women, it is some of the things of try to tie them to people that can help them. And I like the point of big companies. Another thing for women is, who do you sell your product to? It's great to have a connection to a big company as a client. And so you could be facilitating a lot of these introductions, giving visibility to women's companies, or just inviting some of the women founders to come and participate at events where they might meet people. It sounds kind of basic, but I think that's honestly what would stimulate more women to be high-growth entrepreneurs. It's the connections that will help them.
And you cite the Kauffman Foundation, which I think, Governor Hyman, you had at another meeting. It's a great group. They do entrepreneurial work. If somebody wants to look at what all the work is that they've done, it's an excellent group. They're located in Kansas City, Missouri. Governor Dalgard from South Dakota.
Thank you, Governor. My question's for Amy Wilkinson. Could you expand on your web mentor matching? One of the first points you made was create a web-based mentor matching tool. Do you know of any example?
I know of one example. The Small Business Administration has started this 1 year ago. So there is an SBA initiative. It's 1 year old, and it's targeted towards energy, kind of green tech, clean tech. And so 1 year on, there's not a whole lot of data to let us know it's working or not, but that is a model that the federal level government has just stood up for the same thing. And that's about the best model that I know about at the government level. There's certainly plenty of models through alumni associations of universities. And so I would be looking to emulate university alumni that does pretty solid mentoring. But at the Small Business Administration is the one I could point to.
Governor Markell, Delaware.
Thanks. Two quick follow-ups. First, on the sports analogy, I can't remember if it was last year at this time or in Utah. One of our speakers was the president of MIT, and she really made the same point and was really talking about the importance of celebrating the entrepreneurs and celebrating the inventors and the like. And Amy mentioned the robotics program. I mean, there are others. My son participates in something called Odyssey of the Mind, which is similar. And I mean, literally, you go to the world competition. This year it's going to be in Iowa. It's 10,000 kids last year at the University of Maryland, and kids sort of getting together. It is very much a competition. But to see what and these kids really get excited about science and about the invention and being celebrated. The second thing I wanted to follow up on was this issue about the women and access to capital. I think Amy's certainly right about the networks, but this is something that we have looked at very, very extensively in Delaware, going back several years. And years ago, in fact, when Governor Heinemann and I were state treasurers, there was a big move around the country on financial literacy. And we, back in 1999, put together it was a one-day conference called the Every Woman's Money Conference. And the demand was just off the charts, and we realized right away that doing a one-day conference was fine, but what we really needed was a movement. And so we ended up creating something called the Delaware Money School, and it still is going on today. We offer about 600 classes, free classes a year on a whole variety of financial topics. Probably 90 to 95% of the participants are women. And the fact is, I mean, women just face an unbelievable number of disadvantages when it comes to money. I mean, they spend less time in the workforce than men do. They earn less, and that gets worse with age. They invest more conservatively. They live longer. And so, I mean, I think the first step is to really get them connected with more of the basic financial literacy so that they feel like they're ready to start taking some of the risks. But they really, I mean, there are just so many sort of marks against them before they start. And we have found that starting at a basic level, and we have more than tens of thousands of women participating in this program. And you can see the stories as they learn more and have developed more confidence. Then you see them taking more risks and starting businesses. And then they have the know-how, and just as importantly, they've got the confidence and they've got the networks to seek the financing.
It's good thoughts and good comments. Been good discussion around the room, lively discussion with the panelists, and excellent thoughts put forward by the panelists. Amy and Jeff, thank you very much. You've certainly stimulated my thinking, and I've already sent a couple of notes to different people emailing about things to look up that you've challenged us to here. Before we adjourn this meeting, I want to remind the people in the Economic Development Committees that in December, this group adopted 3 interim policies as part of the NGA's policy development process. They were in commerce, transportation infrastructure, and public finance. I want to thanks to everybody that served on the committee in collaborative approach. We've consolidated in the committee 17 existing policy statements, totaling nearly 25,000 words, made them into 3 principle-based policies, totaling 1,300 words. I think here less is more. If we can get this tied down, and particularly these key areas, interim policies, I hope, will advance under regular order under the chairmanship of Governor Heinemann, that will move these forward on Monday. Do any members of this committee have any other business items they want to bring up or suggest that we bring up prior to the Monday meeting overall? If not, I'll declare this session adjourned, and we'll look forward to reconvening on Monday.
So it looked like headline, yeah,